Most people think that you need a pile of cash to get into real estate. What they don't realize is that sweat equity is actually just as powerful. I bought a duplex that needed work, fixed it up while living in one side, and rented out the other. And once the rental income was applied to the mortgage, my actual out of pocket costs dropped to around $350 a month. And I was building equity the entire time. I'm going to show you exactly how I pulled that off because this is actually one of the most realistic paths into rental real estate investing that people really don't talk about enough. If you want more content like this, let me know by hitting the like button. And if you know of someone else that would enjoy this content, please share it with them. And post any questions you have in the comments. So at the time, I really wanted to buy a duplex or some sort of real estate rental. The problem is, I had a young family. I had no money. I was working for FedEx at the time. I was working about 55 to 60 hours a week, and I was doing online college at night. So I had no money, no time, and lots of responsibilities. Plus, I was renting at the time, so I really felt like I was throwing my own money away every month. And that was frustrating to me as well. Funny enough, I ended up telling my landlord, I said, yeah, I'd love to buy a duplex myself one of these days. And because my landlord was a good dude, he mentioned to me, hey, my realtor has a coworker in her real estate office that has a duplex in town that he's been trying to sell, and he recently took it off the market because it wasn't moving, it wasn't getting any bites. So I asked if I could get his phone number, and then I reached out to him and I made contact and asked him about the situation and if he was still willing to sell his duplex. He said he was, and he agreed to show me the duplex. So when I walked the units, I noticed it had a lot of damage and it had a lot of deferred maintenance. So this place really needed a lot of help. My assumption is that he was a disinterested landlord that kind of wanted to just get it off of his hands. So he really didn't put a lot of time or maintenance into it. That's just my guess. I don't know for sure. So when I walked the unit, here's a couple of things that I noticed. One of the tenants had the backyard completely filled with old trash bags full of trash. And come to find out, the tenant didn't want to pay for the city trash to come by, so he would just pile it up in his backyard. I probably had to move about 40 to 50 trash bags full of trash out of that backyard after the purchase went through. That same tenant had a giant stand up freezer that was just full of old fish that he left. He said he didn't want it anymore. I guess the guy liked to fish a lot, and then he liked to fish. He didn't like to eat it though. The weird thing is the landlord had converted the two garage units that were side by side. He had converted them to actually a third unit and got it metered and everything. So it was technically a triplex. And while it was done with the conversion was done with permits and everything, it was really not done nicely, unfortunately. So I wanted to tear that out. Also, the units had all four sides of the duplex were wrapped in LP siding, which had failed, and there was a big lawsuit over it. And the siding was literally swelling up from the rainwater and like flaking and falling down. So the whole place would have to be resided. Now, I had carpentry experience at this point, so I wasn't afraid of having to make my own repairs. However, don't get hung up on that. That is an advantage, but it's not. This was at a time before there was AI or YouTube. And nowadays, like if you don't know how to install flooring or something, you can just go watch a video on it. And I would have loved to have had the opportunity to reference something like a YouTube video or to even ask ChatGPT, hey, how do I fix this? I don't know what I'm doing. That would have been fantastic. It would have been like having a general contractor sitting right next to me. We live in a time now where it's a lot easier to do your own repairs than it was back then. Back then, you had to know somebody or read a book. And as you know, when you read a book, translating what you're reading in that book to what you're doing with your hands can be pretty difficult to do. That's a large leap for most of us, me included. So we bought with an FHA loan, we lived in one side, and we rented out the other. So here's a list of some of the repairs I had to perform. We had to tear out a propane fireplace that was kind of just sitting in the living room. It wasn't put in the right spot. It was right where lots of people would walk by. I knew renters were going to burn themselves on that fireplace if I left it. So I had to tear that out. That was the first thing I did. And we had to tear up all the floors in the entire house and replace them with vinyl tiles, regular tiles, and carpet in the bedrooms. It was funny because in the dining room, there was actually a layer of carpet in the dining room. I thought, well, that's kind of weird, but I've seen it before. But I tore up the carpet and there was a layer of wood flooring. And I thought, oh, they carpeted over wood flooring, but it was so damaged. The wood flooring was in such a bad state that I ended up having to just tear out the wood flooring as well because it was not salvageable. But underneath that wood flooring was another layer of wood flooring that was also not salvageable. So somebody had put wood flooring on top of wood flooring and then put carpet on top of that. So had to tear all that out. I had to put down 3 layers of shellac in bedroom 2 because they had a cat and they kept it locked in that room, and the cat would just go potty all over the floor, and it smelled horrible, and shellac was the only way that I could get that scent locked in so it wouldn't just hit you in the face right when you walked in the bedroom. It smelled fine after that. Shellac is amazing. We had to repaint all the walls. We had to tear out all the trim baseboard like you see along the floor here, and you see going up the side of the door. We had to tear all that out and replace it. I had to sand down all the cabinets and restain them because they were in really rough shape. I had to tear off all the exterior siding and trim, wrapped the whole place in Tyvek, put new trim on, hung hardy plank. Remember, this is all 4 sides, and I'm having to do it myself. I borrowed a spray painter from a friend, and I spray painted the whole house myself as well. And that took weeks and weeks and weeks. Well, it took weeks and weeks and weeks for residing and repainting. The repainting itself took probably about 2.5, 3 weeks because I was just doing it after work. Then we had to install a brand new fence around the whole place so renters could have some privacy. So overall, this investment was a ton of work. But was it worth it? Yeah, of course it was worth it. The place has doubled, almost tripled in equity, and it gives me good cash flow. Now, it's not enough to live off of. Like, you're not going to become a billionaire off of doing this, but it's enough to, just take some of the pressure off and take some of the financial strain off. We saved up the rental income and paid for a Disney trip for the whole family. So, of course, naturally, now I want to get 10 more duplexes. The point is, if you're willing to do house hacking and you're willing to put in a lot of sweat equity, this is doable for you. You don't have to be an expert and you don't have to have a ton of money. I had no money. We got an FHA loan and had to put down 3.5% of the loan amount. So yes, we had to have a little bit, but it was a tiny fraction of what someone would normally have to pay when buying a rental. So you can get into buying rentals with little to no money. You just have to be willing to put in a lot of work. And you have to be willing to make small mistakes while you learn, because you will make mistakes, and that's okay, that's expected. Just make sure to keep them as small as you possibly can. Owning rentals is not a get-rich-quick path or a way to become a multi-billionaire, but it is a really good way to ensure that you have some sort of retirement at the end of your working years. If you want to see how I find rentals, go ahead and check out this video here. And thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.